Hi again guys, and welcome to another look at, of course, a specific car in the roster of Gran Turismo Sport, and this is one which, to be honest, I hadn't actually planned to review again, because of course we already reviewed this car in Gran Turismo 6, where it made its debut, and since the car hasn't really changed all that much in terms of its spec, I didn't really see much of a need to look at it again. However, ultimately I decided for two reasons that we're basically going to look at every car in the game anyway, because for one thing the car actually does perform in a different way to how it did before, so it is a justified review, but also more than that, there are simply a ton of people on the channel who were not around back then when we reviewed it, and the quality of the review is doubtless better now. I don't recall if that was a good quality video or if that was the potato camera days, but either way, it's better now. So, this car, the Chaparral 2X, I voiced before, I believe, in the original review for Gran Turismo 6 that I believe this is by far the most forward-thinking and most radical Vision GT car that we've had by far. It makes something like a Red Bull or a Tomahawk look mainstream in comparison. It's not necessarily as dominant as those cars, but that doesn't mean that it's not more forward-thinking, because, I mean, at the end of the day, that is kind of Chaparral's MO. If you look at their most innovative car of all, arguably the 2J fan car, that car actually didn't win a single race. So success and innovation don't necessarily have to go hand in hand. A car can have a great idea and still not use it all that well, or at least not have success with it. I mean, just take a look at a number of vehicles in the Unsung Heroes series on this channel, such as the Pontoon Can-Am car. Brilliant idea, but kind of killed by its own brilliance, as well as a number of others too. As far as this one goes, I think that the innovation is readily apparent. It's a wonderful concept idea, and although it's definitely not my favourite of the Vision GTs, it is one that I have a lot of love for because of a number of reasons. I love the innovation, I love the fact that, as I've mentioned before, they actually used the opportunity of the VGT program to try something genuinely different and forward-thinking and fun, rather than just an advert for their next facelift, which is what many of the manufacturers do. And to me, that's understandable, but that's way too business-minded. This is a game, use it to have some fun, not everything has to be an advert. It kind of does for a business, but it doesn't. You know what I'm talking about. There are plenty of cars that have been built purely to be a present to the company, the Espace F1, a number of others. The car serves no purpose beyond just being a because we can cool piece of automotive history. That, to me, is what Vision GT is all about. It's about being creative, being fun, and using the physics and reality within the game to have fun, to express the values of a brand, the history of a brand, even the future of a brand, and that's exactly what the Chaparral does. It rolls all of that into one. Now, I mentioned earlier on in this video that I believe the car does perform differently now than it did in GT6, so why do I say that? Surely it's got to be fairly similar. It's still laser-powered, thrust-driven, has all-wheel steering, only weighs 450 kilos, has over 900 horsepower, and probably most strangely to me, 587 pound-feet of torque. Now, unless I'm missing something very obvious here, which is possible, of course, I don't see why this car has any torque at all, because torque is twisting power. The car is thrust-driven, so who cares if it has any torque? It's not driving the wheels, it's being pushed along by thrust. So I'm not sure what that torque figure is all about, unless I'm missing something obvious just in the back of my mind, but that's the only thing that kind of stands out as weird to me. And when we're talking about a laser-powered car that sounds like a turbine and crackles all the time, to have that stand out kind of shows how much of a mechanic I am at heart. But in terms of how it actually performs, the car has always been in a bit of a grey area, because it's the kind of vehicle that if you use it correctly, it can be an absolute weapon. If you try it for the first time, you'll probably hate it, because it's just one of those cars, and I would say that now, more so than ever before in the franchise, I can really solidify exactly what I think this car feels like if you've never driven one before. The Chaparral 2X is what you would get if you put the performance, the handling signature, the driver requirements of a Nissan GTR LM Nismo car, the front-wheel drive prototype, and put that into the body of the Nike One from Gran Turismo 4. That is exactly what the Chaparral feels like. It's got that radical, outstretched body shape, which is very deliberate, designed to look like a squirrel suit. Even the guys behind the car said that, they said as much. But the way it delivers its performance is just like that Nissan. And in a similar way to the Nissan, it's easy to misalign. It's a car that many people don't bother to try and use correctly or efficiently or effectively because it doesn't do any of the work for you. This car feels surprisingly primitive in terms of its handling and performance compared to how futuristic it actually is. Because it is kind of primitive if you think about it. It doesn't drive the wheels, it just pushes you along almost like a rocket car. And it certainly feels like a rocket car, but almost like if you could have an electric rocket in a weird kind of way. Now that comes with both advantages and disadvantages. One of the main advantages is, of course, it's insanely quick in a straight line, and when you bear in mind especially that it has just over 900 horsepower, which is good, but that's nowhere near a Red Bull, that's nowhere near a Tomahawk, and yet it's still one of the fastest cars in the game, which actually is a testament to how efficient that power source is, which of course uses a laser propulsion system to essentially vibrate the car forward, which is a cool idea. We're not there yet, of course, but to me that's a very cool idea. And of course that's an oversimplification, but you get what I mean. It's an idea which has some great advantages and some inherent flaws. And again, that's the similarity to the Nissan, because the brilliance of a front-wheel drive prototype is that you can throw it into a corner and throw it through sweeping corners in particular with much more reckless abandon than you could a conventional mid-engine rear-wheel drive one, and in some cases even an all-wheel drive prototype like a hybrid. And if you drive the car and use it well, such as with my tune that I did for it, you can absolutely fly around Le Mans, way quicker than you'd probably assume it could in terms of lap time. However, it's inherently flawed because of being front-wheel drive, because you cannot put that kind of torque and power down with any current system without getting torque steer, wheel spin, and heavy handling. It just can't be done. You have to choose, are you either going to put your foot to the floor and shred the tyres, or are you going to back off the throttle and end up being slower out of a corner? It's a lose-lose scenario. The car has advantages, but it also has inherent flaws which simply cannot be overcome, unless of course you have like a rear-wheel drive electric motor to help you out of corners, which the car doesn't have. So in other words, in its current form, that is the state that the Nissan is in. A brilliant yet flawed idea. This Chaparral is exactly like that. It's brilliant in some ways, but it's also inherently flawed. Now, the way in which I think the handling has changed compared to GT6 is that it's actually more difficult to drive now. In GT6, this thing was easy compared to now. You can fly around the track with just a few moments of practice back then. You won't make it perfect, of course, but it was easily way easier than now. Whereas now the car feels heavier through corners, the brakes don't feel as good. And is that a bad thing? Not necessarily, because the inherent problem as well of having such a futuristic car put into a game which is trying to be realistic is that you can only make the car perform in the way that our current values allow us to understand. So the inherent limitations there are that you don't know exactly how a car like that would perform because nobody's done it. The engine doesn't exist. So to a point it's realistic, but it's still never been done. So the car, I would say, feels as realistic as we can imagine it being, but as far as racing goes, of course, being in Group X kills most of its chances of racing. There are some occasions where you can use it, but this is the ultimate expression of because we can. And for that, I love it. I love it as a Vision GT car. I think it is by far the best Vision GT car in terms of fully embracing what that can be. In terms of racing use, well, not so much. At least not compared to today's cars and today's physics. But that's it for this review overall. Of course, stick around on the channel for more, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.